Hey, folks, welcome back to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. This is our leadership series with the C-suite. Today, we have Ira Greenberg from CEO of Keystone Technologies on with us to discuss how the COVID-19 crisis is going to impact the lighting industry. Before we jump into the conversation with him, though, I'd like to let you know that this episode of the show is sponsored by or brought to you by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. That's NAILD.org, and you can join us there at NAILD.org. Hey, Greg, how's it going?
I'm doing good. We're excited to have Ira here, one of the big dogs in the lighting industry.
Hey, Ira, welcome to the show.
Good morning, guys. Thank you for having me.
Hey, first of all, thank you for all your support over the I guess it's years now, over the years with the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's amazing to see how far you guys have come and how much you've grown.
Thank you.
Thank you. When did you realize that the COVID virus crisis was a business leadership issue for Keystone?
Well, we've been dealing with this probably since January. Naturally, our supply chain has exposure to China, so we've been hearing about COVID-19 quite a bit earlier than it's hit the mainstream media in the U.S. So we've been dealing with COVID-19 not only on the domestic side for some time, but also on the international side through our supply chains. So we've been well in tune with what's been going on. Now it's certainly a different world now that it's hit our shores. But we've been, several months now dealing with it and creating COVID task force to deal with it, both on the supply side as well as kind of our domestic workforce side.
What is that task? Yeah, that task force. What does that task force entail? Who's on it?
So it's a variety of different people in our organization that have different disciplines where COVID-19 might impact their part of the organization. People that are frankly available at a moment's notice. We've had to move very quickly over the last couple of weeks, certainly with the domestic changes. And the COVID-19 task force really is an on-call group of people that we've brought together to be available on a moment's notice to deal with anything that might pop up, whether it's a government announcement, whether it's a supply chain issue, whether it's an employee issue on site. There's been many issues we've had to come together with really on a moment's notice. Really unique times.
The state of Pennsylvania, which is where you are right now, correct?
That's right.
Have they declared a state of emergency? And if yes, have they put out a list of essential services? And if yes to that, are you guys on that list? Or your business is it an essential service?
So yes, Pennsylvania came out about a week ago, I believe. All the dates are blurring together now, but yeah, we were actually one of the early states to go on different progressive levels of lockdown. And we are deemed an essential business. In fact, Pennsylvania is using the term life-sustaining business. And there's a document that the government's put out that dictates what determines a business as life-sustaining. What we've noticed actually is that list is similar to other lists we've seen around the country in other states. But we are fully running. We have a complete operation running here on site for fulfillment, and our entire team that can work remote, such as our office personnel, are all working remote, and they've been doing that really at a very early stage in this entire process. So we were off-site well before I think many other people were off-site.
Is it safe to say that, and it sounds like it is, but every city and every state is able to define what they consider essential? So where you are in Pennsylvania can be different from your warehouse in California?
I don't think that's true. I think there's a fairly clear definition in terms of categorization of what they deem essential or non-essential. We're not really leaving it up to interpretation and trying to get as much clarity as we can through legal and through other means to make sure that we're in compliance. So I think the states, as quickly as they're moving, are doing the best they can to provide as much clarity around the situation as they can. Ambiguity still remains, but I know of one situation, in fact, in Pennsylvania, where a business looked like it was going to be deemed non-essential. The business management team petitioned with the state, and really within a couple days, they were granted an exemption. So there are situations happening where there's further clarification being provided around what's deemed essential and not essential.
Now, in terms of production, you guys get a lot of your product and supply from China, as do all lighting companies and LED companies. How has that affected, or has it affected your business yet, or will it in the future?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, we've seen this on the supply side now for a few months.
Mhm.
So we've been dealing with China's shutdown really since the before Chinese New Year, and then throughout Chinese New Year and beyond. We've had situations where it's been more difficult to get material. So that issue seems to be stabilizing and getting behind us pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Now it's more of a domestic issue. What will demand look like? What will our workforce look like going forward?
Is there any specific material? Is it like an LED chip? Is it a driver? I mean, you guys make the drivers, but what is
Yeah.
it?
Typically, it's the common suspects, electronic components. Typically, products that are going into driver products. Components
Mhm.
that are going into driver products are typically the ones that naturally have long lead times, and in this particular case, those are the ones that tend to have the longer lead times as well. But I would say that most of our vendors are in the high 80%, 90% capacity at this point, and getting product out. In fact, we're getting signals that they'll be up and running at full speed by the end of this month. Some of them have indicated actually they're going to have increased production beyond what their baseline was before the COVID-19 situation was. So I think the supply side is relatively stable and behind us.
Why do you think they'll have increased production? Is it they had time to clean it up and make it more efficient, or what is it to that?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think they, like most businesses, are probably using this as an opportunity to work as their business may slow down a little bit. It's an opportunity to work on the business instead of in the business. So, place opportunity to find efficiency gains where sometimes we're running so fast it's hard to step back and find those opportunities to make improvements in our business.
Isn't that the truth, eh? It really is. If there is a silver lining to this cloud, it's the bit of a breather. I mean, that this has introduced, where you can actually think about how your business is structured, what the individual people are, the people in the right seats on the bus, and so on and so forth. But so we're back to demand. You mentioned demand and the uncertainty about the demand and when the demand's going to come back. Do you think the demand is going, just on your gut? I mean, obviously nobody can predict the future, but what does your gut say, Ira? Is it going to peter back? Is it going to come back slowly, or is it going to come roaring back?
So I think what we're seeing now is demand has been relatively stable, consistent from where it was at pre-shutdown levels. But I think that's a function of jobs finishing up and a little bit of a race to finish up what's already out there, what the pipeline currently looks like. I think once that band of demand is fulfilled, I think there's likely to be a drop down quite a bit. It's going to be very difficult now for new projects to open up. Hearing stories about government offices obviously shutting down over issuing new permits or anything of that sort. So I think securing new business for down the road is going to be difficult in this environment. That being said, I think for sure, right, businesses are going to be there's going to be many businesses, unfortunately, I think are not going to be able to weather the storm. So they won't be able to return to the demand levels that we were before. I think there's going to be a natural slowdown as businesses ramp back up. I don't think their very first consideration is putting more lighting into their facility. I think they're going to figure out how to ramp back up with employees, ramp back up with inventories and things like that. So I would expect some sort of delayed demand improvement even when the economy does start to return. But unfortunately, I think that there are going to be circumstances where businesses just don't return at all, and that's going to be lost demand.
So Ira's calling for a bloodbath, Greg. That's what I heard right there. I hate to say it, but that's what it sounds like to me.
I wouldn't say a bloodbath. I think there's still a tremendous amount of pent-up demand for lighting. I'm encouraged by that. I also think that lighting is a stored value in the sense that if lighting needs to be changed today, it will still need to be changed in 3 months from now or 6 months from now. It's not a restaurant where that meal is lost forever. Mm-hmm. So I think that there is a lot of pent-up demand, and that's exciting. But I think the reality is there will be some businesses that don't make it through, and that will be lost.
It's interesting because when you take a look at what's happened in the last, so before the COVID catastrophe struck. We were talking about a bit of a shakeout in the business, 10 years of disruption, kind of like a sense of innovation and improvement fatigue, too many iterations, too many minor improvements to products. This was kind of a bit of a theme on the show, and how companies and the supply chain was struggling to fulfill these promises of continued innovation in the lighting industry, and that it kind of needed to settle down. I think a lot of companies are not prepared for this kind of crisis. They're not ready for it. They're going to be in big trouble, as you said, after this. Where is Keystone at in terms of its ability to hang on and to weather maybe a 6-month, 12-month storm here? Where are you guys at?
Yeah. Look, I think this is an absolute true test in leadership and in resiliency and in stability. I'm very proud and pleased to say we have a very strong financial position. So I think we can weather this for quite a long time without doing anything that would adversely affect our business over the long term. So from that standpoint, I'm excited about our position. We see lots of other companies in our trade with a tremendous amount of debt, with a tremendous amount of pressure for near-term earnings. And that is not our case. As a privately held family business with basically no debt, we're well positioned to be controlling our own destiny in that regard.
It's interesting how debt becomes an issue in times of crisis. There was a debate last night. So I rarely watch what you guys would have is like NPR, National Public Radio, or public television or whatever. But last night I put on TV Ontario. Scott would know Steve Paikin. So he's like a very well-known Canadian journalist that interviews, does financial interviews. And they were discussing with a former finance minister of the province of Ontario. They were discussing the issues surrounding bailout packages and whether or not companies that didn't survive the COVID crisis should just be allowed to go bankrupt. And maybe that would be better for the economy than supporting businesses that entered this crisis maybe on their last legs or maybe in a struggle, and that sometimes this flood should sink those ships. How do you feel about that?
Look, when a business fails, it's not just the owners that suffer. There's all the employees, there's the upstream vendors, there's the downstream customers. It impacts so many people. And in isolation, in normal times, if a single business fails, it doesn't create a big ripple around the economy. But if so many companies fail at the same time, that's when there becomes real systemic issues for not just that individual company, but the workforce as a whole. And so I'm hesitant to say that I think it's fair to say we ought to just let the weak fail at this point. There will be so many adverse consequences that will also start to pull down some of the more stable companies, just because we all swim in the same sea. And if we have a couple people that fail in normal times, they won't make that many changes to the greater economy. But if we see so many companies fail all at once, it will really have a devastating effect across the board.
But what? I mean, like, why does, like, this is it? And I'm playing devil's advocate with you here. Believe me, I'm uncertain as to what the right answer to a question like this is. But, $82 billion was the number that they were talking about from the government of Canada. And in the States, it was like $2 trillion. That's a lot of money, man. And if that money's going to go out to just flow out there and it's going to trickle down to all these different areas, I think that's a form of distortion. And I'm not sure if it's the right distortion, but what you're saying is, to counter to that, is there's a moral obligation. Is that what you're suggesting? That in a time of crisis, there's a moral obligation for the business community to pull together. Is that what you're saying?
No question about it. I think there's an opportunity here for us to become stronger through this, for sure. But we are all living in the same economy, and if so many companies are failing, they're going to drag everybody down. So as much as it might be appear unfair for certain industries or certain companies, we sort of have to swallow that hard pill and say, you know what, this really is probably the better thing for the overall economy. Now, that being said, I don't think it can be a blank check or an unrestricted bailout opportunity. I think there absolutely need to be provisions in place that protect abuse. That's, that there's a lot of debate going on right now in Washington about what that looks like. But we see it, obviously, the airline industry is a major issue right now, where they're basically a utility company for the most part, or a utility industry for trade across not just
That's
America,
an
but the
interesting
world.
angle, is to look at airlines as a utility. That's really interesting, actually. You're
Oh,
probably
we are all
the internet is
dependent on that.
too. The internet is
Internet, of
too.
course, sure.
The internet's a utility as well. Interesting.
Yeah. But these companies, look, they reap wonderful profits when the times are good. The frustration for most of us is that when the times get bad, they often go hat in hand looking for more money. So I think there should be an opportunity for some provisions to be put in place to reward on the upside, but also protect a lot more on the downside. And I think there's an opportunity here to really make our system work better and not be so knee-jerk reaction in times of crisis.
I read an article. So Europe has been going through basically a slow motion financial crisis for 15 years. With the introduction of the euro and blah, 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 all this stuff going on. But I read an article there about family businesses in Germany and Austria, actually. And I think the title of the article was Guns Clean, Powder Dry, something like that. And how there's a major difference in terms of the interaction between a family-owned business and the government and a stock market-owned business and the government. And the stock market-owned businesses, or businesses that are publicly traded, have much shorter outlooks, and they tend to ask for free money a lot more than family-owned businesses. And family-owned businesses kind of see the state or the government or wherever they are as a partner in the future, whereas the business that's owned by the stock market sees the government as sort of the lender of last resort. And it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see in this crisis if in America, because you don't often hear about as much. Europeans are very big on family-owned businesses in terms of talking about a business being family-owned and being proud that a business is family-owned. In America, the land of capitalism and free markets and business acquisition and selling, it's a lot more wheelie-dealy. People don't really do it as much. But in the last 10 years, we've seen the emergence of the corporate welfare case on the stock market needing support. And I think it's going to be interesting. I wonder if an economist could do a study on the performance of family businesses versus family-owned businesses versus stock market or publicly traded companies during this crisis. Ira,
I think you. I was going to say, sorry to interrupt you. I think you raised an interesting point, because a lot of it has to do with time horizons, and we make different decisions based on different time horizons. And if our time horizon is this quarter, this year, we will make dramatically different decisions on how we allocate resources, how we structure our balance sheets, and so forth. And naturally speaking, family businesses tend to have a much longer time horizon for how they plan. That being said, a lot of times with a longer time horizon, you tend to play a little bit more conservatively, and you understand that over a long time horizon, there's a lot of ups and there's a lot of downs. So you brace for those a lot more, even when times are good. And that's certainly been Keystone's attitude around this. Look, we've been around, we're celebrating 75 years this year. We've seen lots of ups.
Oh.
Thank you. We've seen lots of ups and lots of downs. And here we are to tell the tale 75 years later. And this is just another one of those downs that we're going to navigate through, which I actually think there are tremendous silver linings through this particular cloud we're in. We can talk about those separately. But it's a matter of disposition in terms of how you structure the business for the long term. And if you're willing to be patient and resilient and keep a positive attitude about looking beyond what happens right now, I think there's a real sense of optimism for kind of long-term success without having to take a lot of knee-jerk reactions to satisfy a short-term income statement or balance sheet requirement.
It's interesting how that when you speak to good leaders, they tend, and I don't know if optimism is the right word. I don't know if that's the right word, but I think that, I mean, you're optimistic on Keystone's future, period, right? We don't know what's going to happen with this crisis and how long it's going to take to plan itself out. But there definitely is, from people that are good leaders, Greg, there's definitely a sense that my team is strong. My financial situation is good, and I'm going to make it through this. And there's going to be some casualties, and we're not going to have the kind of year revenue wise we would have normally had. But in a sense, there's like we've spoken to a couple people now, like yourself, Ira. Anthony Corey came out yesterday, and then Ellis Yan. And there's a sense of like almost, I don't know what it is. Like, I'm prepared to face this, and almost curious to see how your team performs in a crisis. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't know. It's not like you welcome it in a way, but in some senses, it's like, this is a good challenge for Ira Greenberg.
No question about it. And look, I could spend a lot talking about what it takes here to be a good leader through these kinds of situations. It's easy to be a good leader when times are good. Mm-hmm. It's hard to really make too many mistakes and be blamed because the ship continues to rise. But really, you're absolutely right, Michael. I think that challenging times define character and define real leadership, and people that can act decisively with clear communications, with being able to move quickly, even though all the information isn't immediately available. This is a time to rally, to motivate, to inspire, to basically come together and build a more unified team. And I've taken that very same attitude around Keystone here. I've had a lot of heart-to-heart discussions. I'm wearing my emotions on my sleeve. People know that it's real and genuine, how I feel about my appreciation for what they're doing. If we've got people on site, I've made speeches in our production and warehouse teams where, it was hard for me to not keep from choking up, just to show my appreciation. And I think that's the type of leadership that people want to see. They don't want to see absentee leadership. I don't think they want to see distant leadership. I think they want people that are in it with them. And that's something I've been proud to be able to provide for our organization. And I just think it's the right thing to do.
Also, I think they're looking for, they're looking for leadership from the president of the United States, from the prime minister of Canada. They're looking for leadership from their mayors and governors and premiers, and they're looking for leadership from the industry they're in. And
no question.
Hopefully,
there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and people like to be reassured when there's uncertainty, and people like to know that they're not alone. And I think that people also want to know that feelings are such an important part of good leadership. You have to really connect at a personal level. That's where I think some of our more visible faces in the news have been coming up short. I think there's been a lot of just disconnect in terms of feeling the pain, and that's something that I feel like I've been able to just do as much as I possibly can here at Keystone. Is I'm in this together. We all have something at stake here to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, our families, our communities, our company. And we look, there's a reason why companies oftentimes, the best led companies come out way ahead through a crisis. They don't just come out ahead or come out still alive. They come out way ahead. And I like to think that this is an opportunity for Keystone to come out way ahead.
The other thing that they're looking for when you're talking about uncertainty, okay, or they're looking for leadership, what the problem people have is not that there's that many people getting the COVID, okay? It's just, I'll be honest with you, like, there's not that, the cases are not that high where I am in Ontario. You look at Pennsylvania on these things, it's not like there's tens of thousands of people. Now, New York's a different story, but across the board. But people are wondering, they're afraid of the uncertainty. They're wondering if their job's going to be there when this whole thing's over. They're wondering if the company they work for is going to survive the crisis. Maybe maybe the company was already in trouble going into this crisis, and now it's even worse, and they have a mortgage, and their wife just got laid off, and whatever's happening. They're really there's a package of uncertainties right now. And if a leader like yourself comes out and says, I'm with you guys, I'm here, Keystone's going to make it through this, we're going to emerge stronger. People, even if we fail, there's a gut check time where you got to say, no, we're not going to fail. And sometimes you do. You don't control everything, Ira, but you're letting your people know that you're committed. And I love that, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm totally with you, bro.
Yeah. And I have to say the response from our team, our vendors, our customers, our employees has been unbelievable. Not just leadership, but you need good followers, so to speak, as well in these kinds of times. And I would say that the other people that have made this possible are all the people on the front lines, doing the day-to-day work to keep our business running. And just the amount of additional effort that they're putting in, the creative ways that they're remaining active and in communications with us, it's really remarkable.
Yeah, for sure.
And frankly, I'm so proud of what our teams have been doing. I'll
tell you this, just to jump on that, because this is like a personal beef of mine that really bothers me. In a time of crisis, there's nothing worse than defiance. Especially defiance from people that don't have expertise. Okay. So, you have people on Twitter, on social media coming out and saying lockdown Canada, lockdown Ontario, the government's not doing enough. And then you look at them and, nothing wrong with being a plumber, but you're a plumber. The person that's made the decision is a team of economists and health experts, doctors, research. Like if you look at the panel that the premiers and the prime minister and the different thing that's going on in Canada, I'm sure it's the same in the States. They're not making gut decisions here. They're listening to extremely smart people. And, the business owners that are looking that I've talked to 3 now, yourself, Ellis, Jan, Anthony, Corey, they took very seriously whether or not they were essential services. That wasn't we're an essential service. Look, technically it says this and whatever. We're going to go back to work.
Sure.
They took that decision very seriously. They put as many people as they could at home and to work from home and kept as many people to have their jobs. So there's a sense in which I agree with you. You need good followers in the company, but even in our society, I mean,
no question about it.
The Center for Disease Control and Prevention is not filled with a bunch of bozos who have no idea what they're doing. There's smart people there for sure. And they're and the hospitals, one of the reasons why these cases are not going so up, one of the reasons why so many people are not dying is not because the virus isn't bad. It's because our healthcare is so good at these places and people are working their butts off and they're doing a good job.
No question about it. And to see people not complying with the requests or now the demands not to socially distance, and to see people on spring break at these massive gatherings and public parks where there's still a tremendous amount of interaction, it's disheartening for all these other people that are struggling to survive, to make sure their lives remain intact, to see people in other parts of the country really not heeding the warning. We're all in this together. Everybody plays a role. And it shouldn't really.
Side to that. There's another side too of the defiance, which is the calling out of health professionals and leaders for not doing enough. I think both sides of the defiance are not helpful. People that are not listening, and then people that are not health professionals and are not having a discussion. They're just accusing people of not taking this seriously at the same. So both sides, I think we need to look to our leaders and support our leaders in a time of crisis, not be one of the problems.
No question about it. True leadership emerges now.
Ira Greenberg, thank you for being a guest on our COVID leadership series on the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast.
It's my absolute pleasure. Great to see you guys. Hope you're being safe.
Thanks, Ira.
Folks, this has been brought to you by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Keystone's a proud member of that association, and we love having them. Check out KeystoneTech.com. But most importantly, thanks for listening. Stay safe, folks.